Hi guys, welcome to a spontaneous A Murderous Heart live. I'm actually just going to jump in if there's an issue with the sound. I trust one of my mods will let me know. We have a lot to get through tonight. Before, okay, well, let's see. I don't hear myself yet. So someone just let me know if you can hear me. Before I jump in, I wanted to say a couple things. I already mentioned this in a community post. Not that it really matters, but I don't think I'm going to watch this episode of Dateline. Like I said before, it's not, a vote of no confidence in Dateline. I think they've done some of the best coverage of the case. It's just watching the trailers. They were pretty jarring, just to see Lori be so unhinged and in a way that was just really lowbrow, combative. I just kind of lost confidence that there was really going to be much information. So I just held back and asked my mods afterwards, like basically, is the juice going to be worth the squeeze? Having said that, they have been amazing, my mods, at making clips of things that they thought would be, interesting for me. And a couple of the things I wanted to address. Tonight is actually going to be kind of fun, just because it's not a heavy topic like this Friday. That's not going to be fun. It's a very heavy topic. It's going to be a pretty heavy lift, even in terms of jumping into the analysis. Just last week, I actually created a tool that allowed me to search across like the two different trials as well as some other information. So I've been able to find things and make connections I've never made before. And so there, and I'm not trying to be clickbaity, but there was one interaction that I think it was quite possibly the most chilling interaction I've read since following this case. Maybe not. I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it was very chilling, and it's really, when I saw it, I was like, this has to be addressed, and then it kind of came up a little bit in Dateline, more in a tangential way. But anyway, so Friday's going to be intense. Tonight, it was actually easy. One thing I will say, there was something Keith said in kind of like the postscript, some of the interviews he did afterwards. I have the highest respect for Keith, and he's one of the few in the journalism space where like he is as kind and sincere as he presents in these shows. But there was one thing that he said about Lori that I just have to strongly disagree with. And I'll kind of be making that case tonight as well as Friday. He said that, he thought Lori was intelligent and that she was quick. She was quick on her feet. I've said this before, and it's not just because I find her deplorable. I'm not just being like that stupid bitch, I've been watching her now for the past 5 years and have been, kind of analyzing her interactions with these other women and even just her reactions to being called out, or times where Keith would hold her feet to the flames. And I do not find her intelligent at all. I have said I do think that she might do a decent job with her defense, but that's not so much because I think she's intelligent. I think she may be able to channel her obsession, and also she has nothing but time. And I think she's also highly motivated to get retaliation. So that's also going to help her to, kind of stay within the bumpers that she needs to stay within. Plus, she also still has outside counsel helping her, which I think she'll need. But in terms of intelligence or quickness, and this is just my opinion. I personally think that some of her outrageous reactions that we saw, even probably more so in the trailers than the actual show, although we did see some of her combativeness in the show, I think a lot of her hysteria that she shows and her antics are not so much because she's crazy, but she needs the time. She, like, even in this issue, and we'll start with the, watching the video, he asked her a question, and one thing I really appreciated in that interaction, which you'll see if you haven't watched the show already, is there is one point they're kind of going tit for tat, and he said something to the effect of, you're going to tell me, and but she's freaking out. She's, she has all these, gyrations and antics, but she's just buying time. And if she had been like normal, then it would have been blood in the water, because people would have seen, oh, she has to take time to think, about her response. But with this particular issue of the rings, even with all the time that she gave herself, and when you watch the video, you'll see she's even like kind of looking up, which we all tend to do when we're thinking. I do it all the time. Like when I'm thinking, I tend to, either look up to the left or, look up to the right. And that's why I think some of the behavior analysis gets ridiculous. Like, it's like, oh, if the person looks up to the left, then they're being deceptive, or, whatever. But I just think some of it is we just need some time to, to process. And she needed a lot of time to process. But then even with all that time she gave herself, the explanation she came up with was, like, I would say on the level of maybe a fifth grader. Like, she hadn't thought through anything. And but anyway, so okay, having said that, let's just go ahead and jump in. All right. Oh, weird. They completely changed StreamYard. Let me see here. Show on stage. The problem is I didn't realize they changed it. So are you guys able to see my screen? Yes. Oh, you're seeing both things. Okay, let me. Nope. Oh gosh. Okay, there we go. Gosh. That was not intuitive at all. Okay, all right. So let me see now if I can get rid of myself. I just couldn't see my normal thing. Okay, so tonight we're going to be addressing the question of, did Lori buy the rings for Zulema and Alex? As always, if you haven't signed the petition for Phoenix Police to investigate my brother's death, I would be indebted. If you are so inclined, you could go to bit.ly/justice4Joe. Okay, this is the clip that we're going to be addressing.
Terms, this would be called a gotcha. And you bought the wedding rings?
That is an untrue statement. You don't know what you're talking about on that one.
It's online. The purchase is there. And then we see the video of those very rings on your fingers and that ceremony on the beach.
Those rings were not initially bought for us. So get your facts straight, Keith,
Who were they
before
bought
you
for?
start making accusations. See, you don't know.
Who were they bought
for? You
for?
don't have any idea because you've heard all these rumors.
You're going to tell me who they were bought for.
Rumor has it.
Who were they bought for, if not you?
Alex and Zulema initially.
That's Lori's brother, Alex Cox, and the woman he would later marry, Zulema Pastinas. Lori's version? After buying the rings and dress for Zulema, Lori and Chad borrowed them.
We used them in our ceremony, and then they were given back to Alex.
Whoops. Okay, so let's jump in.
Let's take turns. This.
All right, so just to kind of keep things moving, I'm not going to play all of the videos, but every receipt that I reference, you can find on my timeline at bit.ly/JT for JJ and Tylee -timeline. So any, just about any entry on that timeline has at least one source that you can click through to and, watch a full video or whatever you want to do. Okay. Oh, also, all the videos that I will play tonight, I scheduled them all to publish at 10 p.m. So at 10 p.m., I'm hoping the live will be over, and it's just going to, they're just going to all populate to my timeline. I just didn't want to deal with scheduling them out because then I always forget. Okay, so I'm going to break this down as a timeline because I think it's important to be able, in order to get this story, you kind of have to understand it chronologically. And the way I'm going to do this is we're basically going to have two swim lanes. We're going to have the Lori and Chad swim lane and the Zulema and Alex swim lane and see if they converge enough to justify her explanation. Okay. So starting with the little lovebirds, Chad and Lori started searching for malachite very early on. This was even before they searched, in reference to rings. So I'm going to play this. This is a snippet from Chad's trial, and I was able to find these references because of now this ability to, I was able to search for all references to malachite in both trials, and it was eye-opening. Oh, one of the things I don't know if it's included in I think I included it in the description of this video, but it was Agent that Heidemann, I think her name was, something like that. She's the one who's testifying in this video. She actually pointed out at one point that Chad searched for malachite even before Lori. So it appears that their malachite obsession, and they were absolutely obsessed with malachite. There was one piece of information I found just in preparing for this live that was oh, this was last night. I was like, what? I'll point it out when we get to it. But also keep in mind, I wasn't really following the trials because I was working full time and doing school. But let me play this video.
1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 156 157 158 And looking at the next search, can you read the date and talk a little bit about that one?
May 5th, 2019, malachite and eBay malachite jewelry.
And what stood out about that to you?
Chad and Lori eventually ended up purchasing malachite stone wedding bands.
And again, May 5th, was Tammy still alive?
She was.
And that lollytimeforever@gmail, did you determine who the associated user is?
Lori Vallow.
And on this first search, can you talk about what we're seeing there?
May 7th, 2019, malachite.
I think you've already talked about the malachite. I believe you said that's a stone that was that ended up in Chad and Lori's wedding bands.
That's correct, yes.
And when we look at the date there, was that date significant to you?
May 7th or 27th?
Well, I guess let me ask it this way. On May 7th, was Tammy still alive?
Yes, both Charles and Tammy were still alive at this point.
Okay, a couple things. I saw a question in the chat. I so rarely ever get to look at the chat. But yes, malachite is extremely poisonous, but not when it's already like in jewelry. At that point, it's been polished, it's not active. But there is a doctor who has been on, I forget the name of the channel now, but her name's Dr. Amy Salerno. She and Rich, they are my two favorite people to be interviewed, and when either of them are interviewed, I just clear my schedule. But I actually made a compilation video of every time she talked about malachite poisoning. She's fascinating. She's absolutely brilliant. It's a longer video. I think it's like maybe 17 minutes. Maybe if one of my mods could just search the channel for it. If you just search Salerno and malachite, it should pop up. But yeah, so she explains just, like when malachite is dangerous, and when it is in its raw form, it is extremely dangerous. So much so, if it's put into a bomb, and this group talks a lot about like malachite bombs, and they refer to them as quote unquote healing bombs. And in fact, I even shared a post this past week when I was doing these searches for malachite. I found a reference that Chad made about how he like prepared some kind of like a malachite bomb for Alex, and this was in response to Lori saying she was basically concerned that he was the weak link and the way that law enforcement could get to them. So that was basically her wink wink nudge nudge, it's time for the village idiot to go. But anyway, so yes, it is very dangerous, but we're not going down that path in this particular live. Okay. All right, so summing up what they talked about, Chad was the first to search for malachite. Now, well, one thing to understand, because I've been in the organic search industry, like basically figuring out the science of how to rank well in search engines like Google. And when someone does a search for something like malachite, that's called an informational search, and generally those are indicative of searches that people do early on before they know anything about the topic. Then as they kind of curate their interest and learn more, the queries become longer and more specific, and they either go like deeper into research, or they become transactional, like buy malachite ring. That's a very transactional search. So one thing I noticed immediately was when she was testifying is that here in May, like his search started very general. Like they both searched for malachite. So that's indicative of them not really knowing a lot about the topic at that particular point. So, but then on 5-5, clearly Lori was picking up what Chad was putting down, and she captured an image of a malachite stone. So she wasn't looking at wedding rings yet at that point, but she was just looking at stones. So clearly they were connecting on this whole idea of malachite. And I've talked about this in other lives, but we learned a lot about their beliefs about malachite because Ian Pawlowski, when pulling together this document for his and Melanie's attorney after he cooperated with police, he basically codified their beliefs. And because, unlike many of the people in this group, he is actually reasonably intelligent. Like I could tell by his outline, because like I take notes in outline form and stuff. I was like, oh, okay, he's left brain. He's an organized thinker. That actually gives him a lot less justification for getting involved in this and doing stupid things like calling Chad dad and, things like that. But anyway, but I am grateful that he codified these beliefs. And so we have enough of a peek behind the curtain that clearly there was some kind of, back channel communication about malachite, and they kind of absorbed this into their whole like mystical beliefs and thinking that they had all of this power. And so malachite became very important to Chad and Lori, and it was very important for them, I think, to have malachite as trophies. Okay, all right, so now let's look at we've talked about for May, here we kind of have a state of the union of where Chad and Lori were. Now let's look at Alex and Zulema. Nothing. They hadn't even connected. Like they had been at a couple of meetings at the same time, but no connection. So clearly Chad and Lori they're out in front on this one. And obviously what I'm going for was, so, she started buying these rings early on. Why would she have been buying them for Alex and Zulema? Okay, so let's move ahead to June. All right, we'll start with this clown car. This is June 4th, and Lori is absolutely gushing to Zulema. And I'm just going to read this exchange. This came from the Chandler police report. And because Zulema cooperated, they pulled the data from her phone, and that's why we have so many of these interactions between Zulema and Lori, as well as Zulema and Chad. Whereas we found out at Chad's trial, they never pulled the data for Melanie Gibb and David's phones. That's why we don't have as much of a peek behind the curtain about their involvement. But on June 4th, Zulema and Lori had this interaction. Zulema said, "I was exhausted when I woke up this morning. We must have been battling all night last night. I thought I felt your presence at the temple this morning. A female presence full of light came to see me." I'll just say, yeah, I think Zulema was more into Lori, obviously, than she was into Alex. She wasn't into Alex at all at this point. I don't think she ever was, but anyway, Lori replied, "It was a battle. It's never ending lately. I did come to you this morning. We are visiting parts of the earth to begin the healing process, which will allow her to be men, terrestrial, in time." What? These people are idiots. Okay, Zulema. "Okay, your light is so bright." She was always kowtowing to Lori, just trying to curry her favor. So then Zulema asked, "Was Raphael with you?" Raphael was one of Chad's names, Raphael and James. Lori said, "Always. We are never apart, just in percentage." So, this whole percentage thing, you'll see a lot of this in Friday Night's Live. But you can tell that Chad, I think he tried to be left-brained. I mean, really, he was just dork-brained. Like, he he used numbers, but not in any kind of intellectual way. He just used it to use them to try to, I don't know, assign more weight to his ridiculous beliefs. But anyway, so apparently there were percentages in even how much they were together. Zulema, I felt him too, Lori. That's right. This is why I laugh when people are like, "Oh yeah, Chad was building a harem. He was going to have all these wives." Anytime someone says that, and I don't mean this to like make fun of people who think that. I think, they probably watch a little bit too much TV, but it does indicate a lack of understanding into just how jealous and competitive Lori was. So Zulema would say these things that, kind of, she got out of her lane a little bit, and Lori would say things to kind of push her back out, into her own lane. So Zulema is like, I felt him too. And Lori's like, just like you and your eternal companion, we have 120% of spirit and we split it. I mean, obviously this is not someone who is very intelligent. This is really, really, like we're talking elementary school level stuff. But basically what she was saying, like, hey, listen, get your own eternal companion. And then Lori said, that way, part of our spirit is always together. Zulema, that is so cool. All right, so now let's jump into the Alex and Zulema lane, and we will start with the continuation of that interaction, because I actually thought this was really funny. Lori said, I think it's the only reason we agree to come back. And Zulema's like, she very rarely ever disagrees with Lori, but on this point she's like, yeah, I can't see that. And then follows up with, who would want to come here? It's so dark and evil here. We were valiant warriors for sure. So Zulema definitely can't see coming back to Earth, especially for a bro. Okay, but they did have something in June. Here you can see on June 22nd, Alex sends his first text to Zulema and just says, hey Zulema, it's Alex. This I thought was also funny. Zulema never saved the number under a name and just left it as a phone number. Anyway, so what I thought was so funny is, here, like, Lori and Chad, they're already planning their wedding. It's toward the end of June, and Alex just sent the first text to Zulema, and Zulema never saved his number, like never just added it to his contacts and was like, oh, this is my boo, or this is Alex C, or anything. It always just stayed the raw phone number. Okay, nothing really significant related to to rings. Oh, just a Okay, nothing relevant to the rings happened in July, so we're going to jump ahead to August. And here you'll see Lori and Chad are charging forward with wedding plans. We'll jump to this. Well, no, I'll just read the whole thing. This number only appears as a contact in the Lori for Style account. At least that's the account that fit into this redaction. And Lolly Time fit into this other one. In the Lolly Time account, there is a message from this number to Lori, and this was just a phone number. Number linked to Alex Cox. The message read, "It's Leilani Lee." So this was her burner phone. So this was her thinking no one would be able to figure out, like if they pulled all of this data, that Leilani Lee is Melanie Lee. But anyway, it's Leilani Lee. Save my number for you guys only. Definitely not for the police. Further content linked to this number. Link this number to Melanie, obviously, Boudreaux. Based on the content of the messages, Melanie was very close to Lori. Lori even sent Melanie photographs of malachite wedding rings on August 14th. This was prior to the death of Tammy Daybell and are the type of rings worn by Lori and Chad when they were married. Okay, so this was the receipt for the rings. It shows up here as August 15th, but you can see here it was August 14th, and everyone who testified to these rings put it as August 14th. One thing I just noticed today that I had never noticed before is this email address. I haven't seen that, so anyway, and I just think it's absolutely hilarious that these rings were glow in the dark. But the artist who was going to make these rings, he was in school and he ended up canceling the order because he didn't have time to make them. So they were back at square one, but we see at least this was her first attempt to buy a ring. Now, this was new information to me. So maybe those of you who followed the trial really closely knew about this. I did not know about this, but there were actually 2 attempts to buy malachite wedding rings before Lori actually bought the rings on October 2nd, which also was the date that Brandon was shot at. But so she had a second attempt on August 25th. So just less than 2 weeks after the first.
And do you recall when Charles Vallow was killed?
July 11th, 2019.
And again, on August 14th of 2019, was Tammy Daybell still alive?
She was.
And then did you find another attempt to purchase rings?
Yes, on August 25th, 2019.
And what did you discover in relation to that attempt to purchase rings?
She attempted to purchase 2 custom titanium rings with malachite stone inlay, one for a size 4.25, the other 11.5, from Revolution Jewelry Designs with an express insured shipping to 565 Pioneer Road, apartment 175 in Rexburg, Idaho.
Through the investigation, did you learn who that address was associated with?
With Lori Vallow.
Okay. Yeah, so that didn't go through because the credit card was declined. So, and this purchase, I think it was similar to the Etsy purchase. I think it might have been closer to $200 because I've always wondered, like, why the costume jewelry? Like the rings that they ended up going with were only $35 on Amazon. But I think this is also, indicative of by the end of August, like Lori, and this comes into play in Friday Night's Live in a major way. Like by the end of August, she couldn't even buy rings on credit for under $200. So she was running out of money, and she was running out of options. I also think that's part of the reason, and that she took over Tylee's Social Security payments. But anyway, so so she tried to buy these rings again, but one thing you really see here is they are hyper focused on, it's almost like we don't even care so much about the quality, like we'll go super budget, on these rings, but they have to have malachite. You don't see this obsession with Alex and Zulema. They're both like just kind of hanger-ons. Okay. All right. So let's look at what Alex and Zulema were up to in August. Okay, so August 7th, Lori and Zulema have a really bizarre exchange. Zulema said to Lori, "Were you trying to tell me the other day that Alex is going to be my husband to finish my mission here?" Zulema follows up, "I'm a little slow at times and I don't get hints." Lori, "Yes. Did you get that answer? 2 question marks. Lori, "It's what we saw in the future." Zulema, "I had an impression when I met him for the first time, but I dismissed it quickly because I really didn't want to have a man again in this life." Zulema, "I'll ask in the temple tomorrow." Lori, "Okay, that's good. Always ask the Lord. He's the only one who knows what he has in store." Zulema, "You always encourage me to do that, ... I love that about you." Lori, "What time are you going to the temple tomorrow?" So Lori's like, "All right, come on, let's get on with this." Zulema, "Early, 7 a.m. Then Zulema asked, "Does he know?" Lori, "Yes, he knows. He knew before we told him what we saw." Zulema, "Interesting, ... Zulema, "He knew? The one that can't see anything? Think veil and all?" I think that was supposed to be maybe thick veil, or yeah. Anyway, think veil. "I didn't, and I'm the one that can see things." I mean, these exchanges, oh, they kill me. Zulema, "So in the past 2 days, I've had guys come to me at Starbucks while I'm working. That hasn't happened to me in like, I don't know how long." Rofel. Lori, "Funny, when it rains, it pours. A little element humor for you. Ha ha." Zulema, LOL. Zulema, "Can you check this person for me, please?" And send her a name. So it's back to business. So Zulema and Alex's marriage, I mean, it was all prearranged. And they were so in love, they went on one date that month. This was new information to me.
So then you met Alex in November of 2018, and then you didn't start dating him at that point, is that correct?
No.
You started dating him in about August of 2019?
Yes.
Okay. And then how often would you see him in August of 2019?
I saw him a few times in Lori's house, and then one time in August we went out to dinner together.
Okay, so one dinner date in August of 2019.
Mhm.
So we don't know when that dinner date was, but Alex and company rolled out to Rexburg August 31st. And she just found out that he was supposed to be her betrothed August 7th. So they had one date where they went out to dinner between August 7th and August 31st. And then they weren't, she was in Arizona. He was in Idaho. She went out to Idaho for like 3 days after Tylee was murdered. There was no mention of her going out on a date with Alex, so who knows? But then he went back after the welfare check where they were all in the wind, and then they immediately got married. So I doubt they went on too many dates. Okay. All right, let me make sure I didn't miss something. Okay. All right, so skipping ahead, nothing really significant in terms of the rings. happened in September. Obviously, very significant things happened in September, as that's when both of the kids were murdered, but that's not what we're focused on tonight. So, October, all right, first let's look at Lori and Chad. Lori finally successfully purchases their costume jewelry. We only see the receipt for her ring, which was a size 4, because this is what Kay passed on to the media. But we do know from other sources that she also bought Chad's ring as well. Oh, another thing I'll point out with the attempted purchase on August 25th, she wasn't even living in Rexburg yet, and she didn't sign her lease until August 27th. And I also just found out this week, since creating this tool, that she and Melanie took a trip to Rexburg in late August. So it was Detective Consitis who testified about that. He didn't say when they flew out or when they left, but he did say that they assumed it was for her to be able to sign the lease. So that was another trip that they took to Rexburg, where most likely JJ was left behind with Tylee. But right. Oh, but the point I was going to make, she didn't sign the lease until August 27th. So she, was having these rings shipped to the address that she hadn't even signed a lease on yet. They had probably already given her a verbal agreement, but anyway, okay. Then this was a while back when Rich was interviewed on Surviving the Survivor. I think this might have been before Lori's trial. I'm not sure. It was either right before Lori's trial, right before Chad's trial. But they were talking about the Amazon purchases, and Kay commented in the chat that the rings and the dress were ordered October 2nd, 2019, 3 weeks before Tammy was murdered. I will say, I know I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but I try not to operate under the assumption that someone listening to a live has followed all of the other coverage, but there's no record of her ever passing on this evidence to law enforcement, and the Amazon receipts weren't entered as evidence in either Lori or Chad's trials. So if she really did order her dress on October 2nd, that's interesting because I didn't go into it. There were just too many details between the dresses and the rings. But one of the things that I found in searching for wedding rings and wedding dresses is John Pryor made a point at Chad's trial that I forget who was testifying at that time, but he mentioned that Lori, Melanie Boudreau, and Audrey were shopping for wedding dresses on October 22nd, and I believe Chad had done a search for wedding dresses Kauai. So maybe she ordered a wedding dress and then it didn't fit right, or, she didn't really like it, or she wanted to check out her other options. But yeah, there were a number of details. Like I knew that Chad had returned his ring once, but he actually returned it twice and kept getting smaller rings because, he was on the Lori diet. Okay. Then October 30th, Lori requested a wedding quote. So this was also new information to me. And this was less than a week before their wedding.
Through your review of things, did you discover anything in regards to Lori requesting a quote for a wedding?
Yes.
And what did you learn?
Lori emailed a request or filled out a request form on on October 30th, 2019, requesting a wedding on Kauai Beach for November 5th, 2019.
And in those messages you just read, do you recall a specific reference to Kauai?
Yes.
And from your review of that, was there a specified date as to when they wanted to hold the wedding?
On November 5th, 2019.
And do you know if Chad and Lori were actually married that day?
They were.
Another interesting tidbit that I just learned is because I was like, why October 30th? And why such short notice? And one thing I couldn't find was dates for when Chad actually got the insurance payout. So if anyone has that information and could pass it on, I'd be very appreciative. I'm sure I'm just not searching for the right terms, or maybe they didn't go into it. But one of the things I did learn as I was trying to chase down that piece of information was Chad had gone in to talk to, I don't know, some insurance person the day after Tammy died. And so the woman noted like that she was very surprised that he was already checking on the insurance, because usually people don't check on the insurance that fast. And so she said, well, you can't get the payout until we have a death certificate. And so then he got a hold of and he actually said, oh, okay, well, I've ordered 8 of them. And she also noted that that was very unusual, that the most she had ever heard of a family member requesting were 3. So it was very unusual that he would order 8 copies of her death certificate. But he had those, and he came back, I believe it was on October 23rd, but she was out of the office, and so someone in the office said, come back October 30th. So he met with her again on October 30th. He had the death notification or death certificate, and she was able to process the whatever that is, with the insurance company. So I think at that point, that might be why Lori was like, okay, great, let's move forward with planning the wedding. And I think that's why there was such a fast turnaround, because Chad kind of had to sweat it out waiting for this woman to get back into the office. Okay. All right. So they were moving along at quite a clip in October. And this was a funny detail. All right. So Alex and Zulema. All right. So on October 30th, Lori texted Zulema, hi, beautiful. So she needs something. Alex and Mel may have to come there tomorrow and may need a place to stay. They could always stay at a hotel, but your house might be more protected. So manipulative. But Zulema, who, was just always kowtowing to her and Chad, my room is available. I'll sleep with Kara. Kara was her teen daughter at that time. So here they are. They've been on a date. They know they're supposed to be married. Alex is coming into town, and she's like, he can sleep with Melanie, and I'll sleep with my daughter. No, you might, for some, LDS or religious people, you might be like, oh, okay, well, they just wanted to save themselves for marriage. But I mean, this was a very, ostensibly, in my opinion, this was a couple who, as Melanie Gibbs said, I have murderers, living right around the corner. Well, she was, I believe, referring to both Alex and Zulema. So, and this is a woman who encouraged the murder of a 7-year-old special needs child. I don't even think he was 7 at that point. I think he was 6. And then Alex is going down to South America for the sex tourism. We'll just call it. So clearly it's not like this was like a really deeply committed couple. And even David and Melanie, who seemed to be more committed, they were docking in Rexburg, and he wasn't even divorced at that point. So, but anyway, here's Zulema. I mean, my point is clearly there's no indicator that this ring that Lori had already purchased was for Zulema and Alex, or that they would have any need for it. Because beyond, Zulema saying, "Are we supposed to get married?" It's not like that was like a commitment, But anyway, so, Lori, you are so great. We love you. And and then the rest isn't particularly pertinent to this. Okay, now let's move ahead to November. Obviously, Chad and Lori are in Hawaii. I shouldn't say obviously, not everyone is following the case super closely. They were in Hawaii November 3rd to the 14th, and they married on November 5th. So now let's move to Alex and Zulema. So this was a detail I really had to piece together. And it was because of going through all of these, hundreds of text messages between Zulema and Lori, Zulema and Chad, and putting them in my timeline. And then when other dates came up, it was like, okay, let me see what else is, it kind of butts up to that particular event. So on October 10th, Lori said to Zulema, "Yep, just got on the plane. Missing you. You are wonderful. I hope you come soon. Let me know when you can and we will get you a ticket." So Lori was already living in Idaho, and she's saying, "Hey, let me know when you can come up to Idaho again," because she had already been there just a few weeks prior. But Lori was saying, "We'll get you a ticket." And they really wanted Zulema to move to Rexburg, but Zulema's daughter was very opposed to that. Okay, so I cut a bunch of it out because there was a bunch of nonsense. So then moving ahead to October 21st, who is this? Okay, this was Zulema. "I'm good. I've been attacked as usual." This was a common theme for Zulema. "I'm fighting back, but I'm coming up to see you guys on the 7th of November. I already have my ticket. I am so excited to see you." Take note, she's not saying I'm coming up to see my betrothed, my beloved. She's so excited to see Lori and Chad. And I wondered at this time when I was reading this, I was like, gosh, I know Lori is really rude and self-consumed, but why didn't she tell them, "Oh no, don't come November 7th. We're going to be in Hawaii"? And then just last night, I discovered, oh, yeah, she didn't make those plans until October 30th. So she didn't know that they were going to be in Hawaii. So it appears that Zulema still kept her flight, because I was thinking oh, maybe she canceled the flight when they eventually told her, "Hey, we're not going to be here." But it appears that she did keep the flight because of this detail that we learned from Chad's trial.
So then you met Alex in November of 2018, and then you didn't start dating him at that point, is that correct?
No.
You started dating him in about August of 2019?
Yes.
Okay. And then how often would you see him in August of 2019?
I saw him a few times in Lori's house, and then one time in August we went out to dinner together.
Okay, so one dinner date in August of 2019.
Oops, that's the wrong one. Sorry. Let me see if I can quickly pull up the right video. Because I originally had these two events in one video, and then I split them up, but I must have gotten the wrong one. So let me just see if I can find it really quickly. If not, I'll just say, yeah, I just didn't upload it. I'll upload it. If one of my mods reminds me, I'll toss it out on YouTube after the live. But what she revealed was that John Pryor asked when they got engaged, and it was just such a monumental event for her. She was like, I think on November 7th. So we'll go with that. So it looks like she just decided, or it was decided for her, that she was to keep the flight, and then she and Alex got engaged that day. And we don't know when she returned to Arizona. Okay, but one of my questions is, okay, so November 7th, Lori and Chad were in Hawaii with the rings. So what did Alex use when he asked Zulema to marry him? If they got the rings for Alex and Zulema, wouldn't it have been pretty important to at least have Zulema's ring for this momentous occasion? Well, apparently not, because clearly the rings were with Lori and Chad, as we see in this picture here. One thing I thought was kind of funny, and this is just me being immature, but he had returned his ring for a smaller size twice, as I mentioned, but you can see it's still too big here. But so I know before Ozempic there was Lori. He actually mentioned something in one of his text messages about wanting to get in better shape and get abs and stuff. And he did, he was in much better shape by the time they got married. But, okay. So then this is another little detail. Again, I wouldn't be able to catch these things if I didn't curate this timeline. But when Zulema was interviewed by Rexburg Police in Fremont County, they had this interesting repartee here.
So I'm wondering, based on all that, and then
Yeah,
the
this one.
statements to go.
So she said, "This could be you. Come to Hawaii."
What
And
day was that?
that was on November 9th. This was
Okay.
the day that they sent this,
The pictures.
the pictures.
Uh-huh.
And that,
Send that to Chad or Lori.
I think this was Lori's. And she sent it to me and Alex.
Okay, so this is a relatively minor point, but again, it just points to just how stupid Lori's explanation was. So again, she and Chad are in Hawaii for their wedding and their honeymoon. They obviously have the rings, but then Lori sends Zulema and Alex a text message with a picture from Hawaii saying this could be you. So I'm assuming there was a picture of the two of them. And and an invitation for them to come join Lori and Alex in Hawaii. Well, they didn't leave there until, the 14th. But I was thinking, okay, so that would be awkward if they ostensibly bought these rings for Zulema and Alex. They already didn't have the rings for the proposal. Who was going to get to wear the rings? Were they just going to flip for who got to wear the rings while the four of them were there in Hawaii? I mean, obviously this is getting a little ridiculous, but I mean, that's just, it's just an indicator of just how ridiculous her lie was. Okay. So then moving ahead to Alex and Zulema got married on November 29th. Melanie and Ian got married on the 30th, and Alex and Zulema, although, Ian and Melanie weren't witnesses for their wedding. I forget who was. It was like a worker at the place in Vegas where they got married, the little chapel. But here they both are holding up their right hands. So no one's showing off their left hand. No one's showing so my point here is I don't even think they had wedding rings. I remember at one point someone being interviewed and saying he didn't even get her flowers. So I don't even know, one of the people who was interviewed had said that their event only took a few minutes, and they were just really struck by how cold and businesslike the quote unquote wedding was. And I think it was that person maybe who had mentioned he didn't even get her flowers. Okay, and then now I'm just getting petty, but obviously it would be very rude of Lori to abscond with a grieving widow's wedding ring for when they escaped to Hawaii after the welfare check. And you can clearly see those that ring is on Lori's finger. Interestingly, Chad doesn't have a ring on his finger. Okay, and then I don't mean this in any kind of body shaming way. This is really just like a statement of the obvious. They wouldn't have been able to share a ring or a dress. And again, I mean, I really, really dislike body shaming. I really mean this as just you look at them, that obviously it was just a really ill-conceived lie from the start. But then when you look at the calendar of events, nothing in this timeline ever indicates that those rings were ever intended for Zulema and Alex. Okay, you will be able to access the presentation afterwards. I haven't made it public yet, but it will be at bit.ly/LV for Lori Vallow ring claim. Okay, so now I will open it up for questions. I mean, I'm pretty sure no one went into this live wondering, could it be true? But I just, it was just too good not to address, because it was an absolutely ridiculous lie. And I keep forgetting to look into this issue of what makes this a circle. But because I usually am coming on live and feverishly closing up apps from my computer. And anyway, okay, as always, if you have a question, please just put the word question in all caps or use an emoji just to make it stand out, and I will fire up a browser. I don't know, Anna, if you're here and can field the questions and pass them on to me. If not, I can just look through for any questions. Okay. see. Um, okay. Maybe we won't have questions. I mean, again, there's not a whole lot. But one thing I will say, as we wait to see if anyone actually has questions, is I do plan to address a lot more of these things I'm finding in this app by searching. And I've decided I am going to try to make this app public, but it is not just my call, because I've used other people's resources, like from the coverage of the trials and stuff. So I will reach out to them and an attorney, just to make sure I don't run afoul of any the copyright laws or anything. But it was interesting. Like, one of my mods passed on a clip of former FBI agent Douglas. I'm blanking on his last name. Do I even Hart? Douglas Hart. And it was interesting that in this clip from Dateline, he said, and I mean no disrespect to Agent Hart, but he said we can't do keyword searches. And then he was like talking about, and even if we could, who would have thought to search for raccoon? But my mods knew that would hit pay dirt for me, because you absolutely can do keyword searches. I mean, I think what he was saying was they didn't have the ability, but I mean, I'm doing keyword searches with this app that I've built, and I don't have the resources that are available to the FBI. And I'm not, it's not even like there's one search option that uses an element of AI called natural language processing, but that's been around for years and years. That's not new, like generative AI. But other than that, it's just all automation. And even early on in the case, I built a dashboard that not only gave us the ability to search across like some of these shows and some of the court documents, but I also pulled together themes. So like I stitched together keywords that were pertinent to like zombie, dark spirits, stuff like that. So you could, filter by that theme, and it would pull up all references to dark spirits, dark entities, zombies, things like that. So I do hope that I'm able to make this app public, because I hope it will kind of show law enforcement just how much they can do by digitizing more of their content. And I don't mean this like, I hope this doesn't come across arrogantly or like they haven't done enough. It's, because law enforcement agencies tend to be on tighter budgets, they do tend to be a little bit behind the eight ball in terms of like, technology and stuff. But, and like, if, for someone who has access, like a data scientist who has access to, all of the data that they have, like they would be able to do keyword searches and be able to like use this lemmatization where you could say, don't just search for fight, include any variation of fight. So like a search for fight would also include fought, fighting, and things like that, words that are very closely related. But then they would also be able to filter by only include search results from police reports or from court documents or from the media, or or they would be able to search globally across everything, the media, the court documents, and then their massive corpora of police reports. And I think at one point, forget what Rob Wood told me, like at that point, they were already up to, I don't want to misspeak, but I think it was thousands of pages of documents. But anyway, but hopefully, like putting an app like this out there for people to use, just for free. Even people just following the case, yeah, or like media, and it's incredible when you can even just search. Like sometimes if I would be looking for something, I would just search for October, and then I'd find all of these other things where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to come back into that. Didn't know that happened in October, but good to know. But I really just need to stay laser focused on life insurance or whatever it is I'm searching for. Okay. Oh, this is a common question people ask. They've been asking if Lori had a stroke because she kind of pulls more on one side of her mouth. And, I can honestly say she's always done that. Like at least the whole time I've known her, she just kind of pulls more toward one side. And ironically, so did Joe. But he also had a crooked smile, but it was very charming. He was a very handsome man, but they both kind of had that in common. So she's always had that, but I think at this point it's probably just a lot more obvious because one, she's being just so animated. Like we've only seen her in court, and like we've seen the body cam footage, things like that. But even that, like you weren't really seeing the truest form of Lori, because that was still her trying to tamp it down a little bit. Now I can't say I never saw her this tweaked out, because I certainly saw her very tweaked out in 2018 to the point where, and I've shared this text exchange publicly, but I had a text exchange with one of my kids where I just said, I don't know what was going on, but that house was dark AF. And I didn't mean it in terms of like dark the way they talk about dark. I mean, it was just, she just said like some really horrible things. And that's part of, also, I'm getting a little off topic. Not really. I mean, it still aligns with the Dateline thing. I don't want this to come across as critical of Dateline. But I think just overall with the media, I think the story has been a little overly simplified. Oh, can you see Finnegan in the background? He's our New Yorkie. The story has been a little overly simplified in that, like, the media tends to go with this story of like, Lori was this perfect mom, this responsible, citizen and stuff. And then she met Chad and, and everything kind of went down the drain. Like, he took her down the primrose path, and I'll be making this case on Friday after going through their exchanges. I already leaned more this way, and I've said that before, but after going through their exchanges about like the death percentages and the kids' darkness ratings, I am more convinced than ever Lori was absolutely the conductor running the entire orchestra. I mean, you see, and that's not to give Chad a pass at all, but I was surprised when I took this deep dive. You actually see, like, there was one exchange where I was like, whoa, like you could see he says something where he actually refers to, like something to the effect, if I weren't afraid of God striking us both down now, I would, whatever, but you don't see any of that hesitation with Lori. But so anyway, so I think she has been this dark for a very long time. I think she just found someone who would be absolutely taken by her beauty, and she just needed someone who would be willing to kill and encourage her brother to help murder her kids. But anyway, so yeah. But anyway, but all that to say, yeah, I just think like now it's more pronounced because like I think she was most likely getting Botox and possibly even fillers before she went to prison. And even when I was there in 2018, because I just didn't think in terms of Botox. Like I don't care. I don't care what people do. I don't do those things, but that's not a judgment against people who do. I just don't want to have a frozen face, or look like excited when someone's talking about something really sad, things like that. But so I do wonder if maybe she had gotten a lot of Botox because then if you stop, I've been told by others, like when you stop doing Botox, then you lose that elasticity and the muscle toneness, or in your face. So I think that's why her face melted so dramatically. Plus, she clearly lost weight and stuff. But yeah, so I don't know. She obviously has been under a lot of stress. She comes across like she just doesn't care and stuff like that. I think that whole thing is just a show. Like I said early on, I think she kind of had to have some of those big dramatic reactions because she would rather people think that she's evil than that she doesn't know how to answer the questions, or that she looks vulnerable at any point. I also personally, I don't believe at this point. Now, I used to believe that she was still in love with Chad. After seeing their exchanges and seeing how much she used Chad, I don't know that I believe that. I don't know that I believe, not that it really matters what I believe, but I really don't think she is capable of love. I think she has to maintain this appearance of like that she still loves him and is a devoted follower, because if she ever let that down, if she ever let herself question, should I have ever hooked up with this guy? Because you will see on Friday, like she ran out of patience they actually ran out of patience with each other. But she was quite annoyed by, I think she just put up with a lot of his like Star Trek level, explanations of things, because she was willing to do whatever as long as he agreed to help her in her mission of getting rid of her kids. But I think if they had gotten away with it, I don't think that their marriage would have lasted very, very long at all. But I think for her, if she ever allowed herself to question, or at least even let the public think that she is questioning any of those decisions, then she's not special anymore. She's not like this exalted goddess who was going to help lead the 144,000. She's just your garden variety child killer. Like there are thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, of them across the world. Like there's nothing special about that. So I don't think she'll ever let the public see if she has doubts or qualms. But yeah, I don't think she ever believed any of this stuff. I think she was just willing to go along with it because at the core, I think she is either a sociopath or a psychopath, and she was willing to go along with whatever she needed to get what she wanted. But okay. All right. Oh yeah, other people have asked this if she was a good hairstylist and if she ever cut my hair. She did offer. Yeah, I didn't take her up on her offer. So, but I have a friend from the case, actually, two, who had been her clients, and one. She's a really good friend. I think she was Lori's client for 10 years. And she said she was an excellent stylist. She did one of my kids' hair in like a really cool braid once, but that was it. Okay. Ray Hernandez indicated he thinks another person should be prosecuted, but would not give the name. In your opinion, who might that be? Melanie Pulaski. I don't think it was Melanie Gibb. I think early on they decided to make like kind of a backroom deal with Melanie Gibb, and in exchange for her getting a recording of Lori, I think they just let her know that they wouldn't go after her. And I already thought that, I've talked about this before, I've already thought that because of the fact that when she decided to come clean about, like having never had JJ, she lied and said she had him. She called Rexburg police 2 days before she turned over the recording and the day before, but she was directed to reach out to, I think it was Detective Pillar with Gilbert Police, and I thought that was unusual. I actually held back that detail from my coverage until after the trials, because I was like, well, that's something I really don't want to share something that could potentially hurt the case. But that didn't really make a lot of sense to me, because obviously Rexburg Police, they were, in concert with Fremont County Sheriff's Office, they were primarily investigating the missing kids. So, and one of the FOIA docs, this was a page in the FOIA, in one of the police reports, noted that it was a very, like, I think this was the call that was the day before she turned over the recording, but it noted that it was a very brief call. And Mark Means had noted in one filing where he complained about like a lot of missing evidence and stuff, that there were no notes and no recordings of those two calls. And so anyway, so I strongly suspect the person he's talking about is Melanie Boudreaux, now Pulaski. And if that's correct, I agree with him. Even just going through again, and going through some, like while I'd be looking for one thing, I would find other details that were like more pertinent to the attempted shooting of Brandon Boudreaux. And I was just, I'm annoyed that they didn't go after Chad for his role in the murder of Charles, and that they didn't go after Melanie in the attempted shooting of her than estranged husband, especially considering some of some of the details in like her wanting to also get rid of her kids. Like, again, I mentioned this early on, and I don't mean this in any kind of clickbaity way. Then I'm not going to go into it tonight because it is very heavy and it is also very detailed. But there was one detail that it was brand new to me. I didn't know about this exchange, but I mean, it is dark, really, really dark. I think both she and Lori were desperate to get rid of their kids. But anyway, okay. Is she able to have any contact with Chad? What's going on with their marriage? That someone had said that they're not allowed to talk to each other, but apparently they write each other letters. So I don't know what's going on with their marriage. Do we know what Lori's ring looked like from Joe or Charles? I just don't remember. I remember her ring was beautiful, because Joe was doing very well for himself at that time, but and I'm sure her ring with Charles was also very beautiful, but because he was also doing well, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, Madly in Love with Jesus asked, do you think that Lori and Chad decided Alex was a zombie after he gruesomely killed Tylee? No. I think this was the plan all along. Yeah, like Alex, there were different people who in interviews, one of them was Zach Cox. He talked about what a weird guy he was. Colby talked about it in his interview with Gilbert Police the day after the welfare check when they interviewed him. And he called him a bum and weird or nasty. He called him nasty. But one of the themes was that he really didn't have an internal editor, so he would just say things. Like Lori got really angry with him because, as someone shared, and I think this might have been Zach Cox, he had told one of their bishops that Lori had seen Jesus, and Lori got angry about that. But so, and I know that people have tried to say, or I shouldn't say have tried to say, some people theorize that it was because of the car accident where he was said to have had a brain injury, and I'm sure that didn't help. But I had talked with someone who was one of Lori's best friends in, I think it was elementary school through 11th grade. And this person had said that there were always issues with Alex, and that their parents would go to Hawaii a lot, and it was Adam's job to keep Alex under control. But there were issues like this person had told me she and Lori were getting dressed in bathing suits to swim in the pool, and they caught Alex looking in the window and stuff. So it just sounds like he was a creepy kid who grew up to be a creepy adult. So yeah, so I don't really know all of those details, but it was interesting to find out that Barry, I forget who we found this out from, maybe Megan. But they didn't believe in insurance, which, I mean, that's pretty convenient. You know, you don't pay taxes, you don't pay insurance, you're not taking care of your family, you're running off with your wife to Hawaii and leaving your kids behind, you know, reportedly. I obviously can't verify any of these claims, but, you know, to not have insurance, if true, was incredibly irresponsible. But so someone had said that, you know, Alex got into this really bad accident, and someone picked him up, maybe Barry, I don't remember, but they just left the truck on the side of the road and didn't get Alex medical attention. And I've talked before about, like, there was one time I was getting ready for practice. I was a competitive paddler, felt totally fine. Suddenly, in the middle of getting ready, I suddenly felt very sick, and I felt a little woozy. So I decided to go back to bed. This was a Saturday morning, and then I woke up on the floor, wondering why I was on the floor, and I had fallen into like the baseboard, and really kind of banged myself up. But so I had a pretty severe concussion. I remember the doctor telling me, like, you need to go into a dark room for a week, preferably 2 weeks, no electronics, no light. You know, your brain needs to heal. It's just like if you broke your leg, you wouldn't be able to walk on the leg. And she said, but the problem is with a leg, we know not to do that because it really hurts. But she said with people who have severe, you know, head injuries and don't take these steps, they can have permanent repercussions. And then I went through this therapy because I was subject to vertigo. And so I went through, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months of this therapy to get my balance back and stuff. So but I had insurance, so it didn't cost me a lot of money at all, you know. But you know, for Alex, if it's true that he didn't have any medical care, yeah, I'm sure that probably did a number on him. But yeah, I think it was the plan all along. I think, you know, like, I mean, I know just from watching true crime, like, if two people share a secret, there's a chance that law enforcement is going to be able to penetrate, you know, through to one of them. If 3 people hold a secret, so if you have 3 or more co-conspirators, it's just too risky. It's just too easy for them to play one against the other. And I think that Alex, you know, I mean, again, I don't think Lori was is particularly intelligent at all, and especially her logic, I think, is very very delayed. But Alex was even more delayed. I think he was very easy for them to manipulate, which made him, you know, just a huge liability. But also, I don't think he was alone in the murder of Tyree. I think he had help. But then we found out, you know, at Chad's trial, that Chad and Lori had turned off their location tracking and had deleted all of their location data. So they couldn't put Chad there. But I'm quite sure, just from, you know, like running, like unredacting some of these documents that were in the FOIA docs, that Tylee's DNA was in Lori's Rogue. And so I personally suspect, this is just my theory, her DNA was also, again, if I got the redaction correct, There was a drop of her blood in the front, or the only passenger seat in Alex's truck, but her DNA was found in the blood on the floor of Lori's Rogue, and that was after Colby had it cleaned. And then I think also on the seat, the back seat. So I suspect that after they murdered Tylee, they put her in the back of the Rogue and actually brought her to Chad's in the middle of the night, because then that was safer for them to not get caught on any kind of surveillance. Like if they had just put her body in the bed of Alex's truck, that's very risky, like a camera on on like a traffic light or something, could have picked that up. So I suspect they put her body in the back of the Rogue, and the three of them transported her to Chad's under the cloak of night, and then he started disposing of her remains the following morning. Okay. Ellen asked, did you recognize Lori? Were there any very different personality traits from when you knew her? Obviously, I've talked about this before, but like when I saw Lori's cruel side on the 2018 trip, and there was friction between us, especially by the end. I think that's why she canceled our girls' night out without like even saying anything to Tylee and me. So we were all dressed up, ready to go out to dinner and have this girls' night out, and then she was just like, I'm going to bed. But so I definitely saw just how psychotic she was, like in some of the things that she said about my brother Joe, and even just when like I would start to get a little emotional, her response was like she couldn't handle that, and it's not like I was like sobbing or even overtly crying. It's just if she saw my eyes get misty, she would be like, Annie, the world is a better place without Joe Ryan in it, and so some of these things I'm like, I think now she all right, let me back up. So but at that point she could still rely on her charm. I had by the end with some of the things that she said, and especially in front of Tylee, because in my mind I was thinking, if it was true, some of these allegations that you're making, the fact that you are going into, or trying to go into these disgusting details in front of your daughter, who was supposedly the victim, was incredibly insensitive. And then I was very confused by just Tylee's non-reaction to it, and when she had reacted to the one detail of Lori said, maybe Joe just said that, your mom had dumped boiling water down his back because that's what he wanted to do to you, Tylee. And, Tylee reacted pretty violently to that, but not violently physically, just screaming. But no reaction to her going into these like terrible details until, I just said, Lori, please stop. But yeah, but she still tried to rely on that charm, like what we saw in the Gilbert body cam footage of where, she, and also the body cam footage on the day Charles was shot and killed. She like becomes manic, and she just like, she's smiling, and it's like she's trying to like express all this energy and like I'm just this, really positive person and there's, no tamping down all this sunshine. But so I had seen that before. But I think at this point she knows like even how Keith reminded her, you're the most you've been called the most hated mom in America. And so I think at this point, like she stopped even trying to be charming. I did see someone sent Janice made a funny clip from the clip of her talking about going on dances with the stars, and you could see her being flirtatious and trying to be charming in that reaction, but for the most part she was just giving into the the evil and the combativeness and the insufferable arrogance, and just like and I've talked about this even just with, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but like in some of Colby's rationing or rationale of like with my talking about the fact that Tylee wasn't at their wedding, and he would lean on these arguments of bro, you weren't there, like as if like if someone's not there they can't possibly know. And someone had pointed out to me in a message like that this is very much like Lori, and we did see that in these clips, and at least the clips that were sent to me, like she was asking him, oh, were you there, did you hear him say that? And and Keith was kind of taken aback by it because it's like, dude, we've seen your text messages, and even like the thing of the exalted goddess, or whatever he had said, something about her being exalted. She tried to deny that with the argument of, you weren't there, you don't know, get your facts straight, kind of thing. And it, so, but I just went and pulled it from the James and Elena story. It was just right there. She absolutely was referred to as a goddess, and on more than one occasion. It's just the James and Elena story was the most obvious, and but in her thinking and in her argument, she's like trying to say, oh, were you there? And I'm like, I hope she tries this in representing herself. Like she'll just make it an absolute fool of herself, because I've never seen the Maricopa County prosecutor's office in action, but I'm sure they're going to bring their A game like Idaho did, and they're going to have all this evidence, So anyway, okay. Let's see. All right. Lori's brother Adam said on his podcast he was going to be called as a witness. Well, yeah, I mean, he was the last person to interact with Charles before he was shot, and had other interactions with him. This means Lori is still interested in finding out about the supposed intervention, but I'm not sure why she cares. So at this point, she knows all of the details. Even before she represented herself, she still had access, to these files and the evidence that that the state, presented. You saw Chad on his little Mattel computer through his trial, and you saw occasionally Lori looking at the evidence on her laptop. So she already has those questions. I don't think there's anything that she wants to find out by representing herself. I've said this before. I think she's out for blood. I think she wants to humiliate people. And I think she sees this almost as like a lost leader, because she has to know she's never leaving Idaho. She'll say, like, oh, we're going to be exonerated. Jesus showed me this. And maybe she does believe that. I personally, I don't believe that she believes any of this. But yeah, so yeah, I think she just wants to watch them squirm. So anyone she calls as a witness or cross-examines, because the state calls them as a witness, I think she's just going to find ways of, like, if they compromise themselves in any way, and she wants that person to suffer because they haven't kissed the ring. She's going to line her questions up accordingly. And even if the state objects, you're still able to get some zingers in there. Okay. All right, Carolina asks, do you think Lori Daybell is still down her delusional rabbit hole? Also, did she ever tell that she died when she gave birth to Tylee? Did she ever mention her NDE to you? No, she never mentioned that she had an NDE. She told me that before she went on, I forget, a Wheel of Fortune, I think it was. When she was telling me that story, I think this was in the the joint vacation we had with when she was still with Joe, because I'm pretty sure when she told that story, Joe was there, and kind of rolling his eyes. But she told me that God told her she was going to be on Wheel of Fortune, and then she applied, and she got on, and won some amount of money. I forget now how much it was, but I just think like I look at that as more of a data person. I'm like, well, at that point, she was very beautiful and very sunshiny and energetic and stuff. So I just think, like, okay, you were watching Wheel of Fortune, you probably thought, like, oh, I could do that, and then came up with this story. Like, it was like, I think it's and this might be unfair to her parents. This is just my opinion, but it does seem like they really thought she was extraordinarily special. I think they thought she was a replacement of Laura. I'm not saying they thought she was a reincarnation, like Lori said about Tylee, where she thought Tylee was a reincarnation of her sister Stacy. But I think even the fact, and I've talked about this before, the fact that they gave her such a similar name, it was like Laura and then Lori, and Laura, apparently her nickname was Lala, and then Lori's nickname was Lolo. And so and I think because she was such a pretty little girl and, had this blonde curly hair and blue eyes and everything that their family saw as, like, very important, I think she just grew up thinking that all of her thoughts were special. And so I think she kind of took that into her religion. I don't know how much her family also played into that, like, with some of the reports of them thinking, like Barry thinking that their family was like the top 5%, and things like that. So I think that those things helped to make Lori who ultimately who she unfortunately became. I personally don't believe that she's delusional as she comes across. I think if Lori ever accepted the fact that she's not special and she's just a child killer. I don't think that the prisons probably have the resources that she would need to process that kind of information. But yeah, so no, she never mentioned anything about an NDE or that she died or that she saw Tylee as an adult, through the situation. But at the same time, I was obviously very tangential to the family. I think I only know as much as I do because of Lori's lack of an internal editor. Even going through the document that someone who was involved in the investigation into the child, the sexual abuse claims, the notes that this person handed off to me, some of the details that were in there about me, like they came from Joe, because Joe was very open about our family, about like his trauma and stuff, and I wasn't. Like, he was just really open in talking about it. So, part of me was like a little offended even after the fact, like reading these documents, and I'm like, dang, like why were they even talking about this? But but anyway, so I think similarly, I only know as much as I know because Lori is such an open book and was just like this super extrovert and was quite taken with herself. I think she just really enjoyed talking about herself. Okay. Brenda asks, do you think Lori knows she is lying, or do you think she is really delusional? No, she may be delusional about some things, but no, I think she knows. I think again, I'll make the case on Friday. In my opinion, when you see these text exchanges between her and, well, I shouldn't say that. I'm not trying to go with a foregone conclusion. People can make their own conclusions, and I've been very open about, saying I don't have any training, like Psych 101 in college. That was it. But some of the stuff is, it's pretty intuitive. But I think that in those unguarded moments where she was angry, I think that's when she revealed the most, because, and I mean no disrespect to my biological mother who was schizophrenic and truly delusional. Like, here's an example of what that looked like. Like, she abducted me twice, but on the second time I was older. I was 9, and I was supposed to turn in a book report. I was in 4th grade, I think, and I remember this book. It just, like the title, I think it was just Blood, but it was a brand new book from the library, and I didn't grow up with access to books, so I think it stood out in my memory because I was just like, wow, I'm the first person to like open this book. So my whole book report was about blood, so I clearly already had kind of a gravitational pull toward science. And I've talked before about how like I made this massive timeline when I was like 10 and stuff. I'm sure the universe was like, you'll use this skill someday, kid. But I wrote this book report, and she showed up at the door. She wasn't even supposed to know where I lived, but my foster parents, that's a whole different story. They would have me write letters to her. So my return address was on the letter. But so she showed up at the house, and my foster mother said, "You're not going to school today." So she actually let her into the house. And this is just one example. I mean, there were a lot of delusions on display that particular day. But I was upset because I was afraid I was going to get points off of my book report because it was due that day, and I had even like gotten like one of those covers and stuff. So I was so proud of this book report. And so I must have said something about it, like I need to turn in my book report. So she wanted to see it, and so I showed it to her, and I told her, you know, this is the book that it's based on. So she like flips through it, and she's like, this isn't about the blood of Jesus. She was like super, super, super Catholic. And like would, you know, I only saw her, you know, like in the sanctioned, supervised visits once a year. But she would always bring me a rosary and stuff. But she was like, this isn't about the blood of Jesus. And I remember telling her, no, it's just about regular blood. She got so upset. She threw my book report into the trash along with the book. And then I remember I got upset and I wanted to get the book, both of them, out of the trash, because I'm like, you're ruining my assignment. And I remember, you know, my foster mother stopping me. So, I mean, it was like, you know, there were multiple, you know, situations like that in the time that she was there. And I mean, that's, in my mind, that's true delusion. Like, she couldn't pull it together. Like, if someone had shown up with a, you know, like with a camera or whatever, like, she wouldn't have been able to blend like Lori could blend, you know. So Lori had this side of her where clearly I think, you know, I obviously think she murdered my brother or had a hand in it, but I actually question if she murdered even before Joe. But she could blend. She could always blend. Now she can't, you know, but she doesn't really have the opportunity. But in my mind, that's, you know, and again, you know, my one experience, well, it was multiple experiences with one person who was truly, truly delusional, you know, doesn't count for a whole lot. But in my mind, that's what real delusion looks like. Like, we couldn't have like gone out to a restaurant and, you know, and her pull it together. Like, she created a scene wherever we were. And but anyway, so I personally, you know, although there may be some level of delusion even in some of the things that she told me about her beliefs, I want to be careful because I don't know how much of it is actually, you know, like, some of it does seem to be like LDS accepted beliefs, like the, I don't know, the pre-mortal stuff. Some of the things she told me, it was very offensive to me, you know, because like she told me like, oh, you actually chose, you know, your parents and you chose your life and, you know, things like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm never going to believe that. But so I think, you know, some of her beliefs, just even because of the family she grew up in, I think they were always going to have this gravitational pull toward more extreme, bellicose, warrior, you know, type beliefs. But I do not believe, I will never believe, especially after really diving into her and Chad's exchanges and seeing what I saw when she was angry at him. I'll never believe that she actually believed in any of this stuff, like that they were, you know, assigned to lead the 144,000, that she was an exalted goddess, all of those things. Like the claims that even their group, this little like crow of women, the claims they were making, they were ridiculous. So it was like, oh, you know, I got my period back and it's like bright red and crampy and all this stuff, you know. I mean, like, their claims were absolutely ridiculous. But I think that these women were lonely, they were bored, and they just really enjoyed having this almost daily contact. Like, these, when I started piecing together like how often they had these like little prayer circles or even like meetings over Zoom and stuff like that, because of Zulema, who was like basically the group scribe, because she had to talk about everything because she had a really desperate need to be accepted and, and revered in the group. But it was nearly daily. So I think they all just kind of, what do they call that? Folie à deux or something like that, like the madness of two, except, I think it was more just, it was like a shared madness that they all put up with because they got to have this constant contact and talk about all their struggles and all the ways that they were like, God's favorite and stuff. Someone just asked the same question about Lori's near-death experience when she gave birth to Tylee. I just went into that. I don't think there was an NDE. I don't think that Chad had an NDE. I remember one of the women who had written a book. I don't remember her name now, but Chad went and met with her. And apparently she had said, maybe in an interview, that like Chad never said anything about having had a near-death experience until after they met. Like he never said anything to her about like, oh, you had an NDE? So did I, And so I think he probably, like for a while, I watched videos on YouTube because I wanted to see like where did they get these beliefs, and there were a lot of these details that they talk about. They come up in these NDE videos. Excuse me. So I think Chad just probably, because he wasn't gainfully employed, I think he probably just learned enough about other people's NDEs to make his own claims. Do you think Lori is going to get pissed during cross-examinations? She seems so combative to me. I mean, she has a very difficult time controlling her emotions, even just like regulating. So, but at the same time, she really doesn't like being called out or embarrassed. Again, that's why I was so proud of Keith in that one interaction. Like, you're going to tell me who those rings were for. But so I think that fear of being embarrassed and mocked may help her, stay in her lane. But yeah, I think she's going to get angry, like, even going back through some of these interactions with the attorneys, and like when Judge Boyce would make a call that you could tell they really didn't like the call, and they obviously they did a really good job of like maintaining decorum. John Pryor struggled the most, but he still, overall was pretty respectful, not good at staying in his lane, but he would like acquiesce and stuff. I think that is going to be very hard for Lori. But one of the things I noticed, even in just like kind of taking some of these deep dives, is John Thomas. This was really endearing. But like, Judge Boyce would deny his objection or overrule his objection, and he would thank him. And so I just thought that was really sweet. After a while, I was like, oh, like I almost felt like kind of bad for him, but like he was so gracious. It was almost like he was like, okay, thank you for your consideration and stuff. But I thought it was really sweet and endearing. But Lori, I seriously doubt we're going to see that with Lori. I think she is going to have a very difficult time showing the judge respect. I think some of the things that we saw with John Pryor, like talking over Judge Boyce, and Judge Boyce, I mean, that guy, he has like the patience of Job, but he would lose his patience with John Pryor because like there was one time he was like, I think he had told him like, please don't talk over the other, I think it was the witness. And then John Pryor started talking over the judge, and he was like, Mr. Pryor, you're doing the same thing to me, something to that effect. So I think we will see most likely quite a bit of that with Lori, possibly her not even, like responding to the judge, or like I noticed there was one time where I think it was Jim Archibald asked Colby a question, and it was a question about Joe, and the prosecution objected, and Colby answered the question anyway. But I think it was just because like Colby wanted to get that out there. But so I could see her doing that, like just kind of like either talking over the judge or continuing her thought. So I think it could get, I mean, it's so hard to predict because she's so unpredictable. But Lori is going to act in a way that she at that time thinks is best for her. Like that is the one. That's the one scarlet thread through all of her behavior. So, okay. Who do you think has the most to lose at Lori's trial? One of her family members, Colby or Adam, maybe? Yeah, I think it's the friends and family members who got sucked in to the whirlwind of, like anyone who was at her house the evening of the 9th when this murder was planned. And Lori did say to Melanie Gibb, because Melanie Gibb wanted to be in on it all, and she was like, I have my whole family here with all the kids, so it's like chaos or something to that effect. So she was telling Melanie, like, don't come over, this isn't a good time. Melanie came over anyway and was like, well, now I'm parked outside your driveway. So but so I think anyone who has has lied, has been revisionist, who Lori has viewed as abandoning her, basically anyone who has anything to hide is potentially at risk unless they kiss the ring. So when I heard that Summer and Janice were at Lori's first hearing, I was like, okay, they're kissing the ring. They haven't been to anything. And now the first hearing she had where she was representing herself, there they were. But I think Summer has a lot to lose, especially if she was the mystery woman in the ring camera footage. But, also Colby, Melanie Gibb. I think she will eviscerate Melanie Gibb. And I do wonder if with some of the victims, if the state may choose not to even call them as witnesses to protect them. Like, I do wonder if the state will even call Colby. But, I mean, Lori could still call him, subpoena him. He might be a hostile witness, but he would still have to answer her questions. So, yeah, that's the part where, I'm kind of of two minds. Like, I want to know the facts. I know that a lot of the stories that have been told are revisionist. I'm quite convinced of that because there are already so many contradictions. Some of these people, like, they loved the media and they talked in front of cameras a lot. And so if you are guarded or you're being less than honest, the more you talk, the higher the risk is that you're going to contradict yourself, contradict another witness, or contradict evidence that's already, like in these FOIA docs. And we still haven't even seen the FOIA docs out of Idaho. And then there are going to be FOIA docs out of Arizona, more FOIA docs. And and then it's going to start all over again, like with the appeals. So I think some of these people who were benefiting at the time, either financially or in whatever way, I think it's really going to come back to bite them, because I think for some of these people, they could be testifying about this case for years to come. Carissa said, I thought I heard something from East Idaho News YouTube that Lori wouldn't actually be able to question people, rather write her questions for a lawyer to read. Any insight? I haven't heard that. I mean, that hasn't been a parameter in other cases. I don't think that they would even be able to do that. Like when the judge ruled that she could represent herself, I mean, she has, as far as I know, now, I'm not a lawyer and stuff, but as far as I know, and, with some of the other cases we've seen where a defendant has represented themselves and they were able to question, even like their own victims. So yeah, I again, I haven't heard that. It doesn't sound right. Because like from what I saw, Lori was told that she would still have these public defenders to help as like advisors. But I'm pretty sure Lori is in her cell day and night preparing her questions and stuff. So and going through the evidence and it's one of the reasons I've said I think she may in some ways do a better job than a public defender, because she just knows the story so well. Lori obviously didn't prep for the questions about the ring. Do you think that she prepped for others? Yeah, I'm sure she prepped for others. But I think also she thought that she would just be able to avoid any question she didn't want to give. So I do think she probably rehearsed some of her responses, like some of the really dumb responses, like, I thought we were going to be friends, Keith. And even the fact that she kept saying his name over and over, in my mind, that was evidence of her like preparing her responses. I think with the ring, she just saw that Keith was like a dog with a bone, and that particular question, he wouldn't let it go, and so she still could have just blown him off, but in that particular case, I wonder if in her mind she thought this shouldn't be like a hard question to answer. So if I don't answer it, people are going to assume that, I was in checkmate. And so, and you even see her in that video, like I said, like, she's looking off, she throws her head back, she's thinking. And it's part of the reason I came to the conclusion. I don't think she was quick at all. I think she gave herself lots of time when, by having all of these like ridiculous responses. I think she was using that as time to think about how she was going to answer a question. But in that particular case, I wonder if she, in her mind, was going back and forth between, no, the rings were for Alex and Zulema or for Ian and Melanie. But I mean, I don't know, but I suspect she was like trying to weigh that either way. And one of the things I will point out in my live on Friday is you see her, and this is also part of the reasons that I don't think she's delusional. She showed a lot of executive function in her negotiating with people. Like her consistent theme was she wanted the kids' death percentages to drop down to 0, and she just kept bringing it up. But she's negotiating. Like when she's asking about that, there are more kissy emojis and fire emojis, and she's mixing it up with, like at one point, like she said something that I think she knew, especially like if Chad didn't respond too soon, or didn't respond favorably, she was like, still hot for you and stuff like that. So she's able to negotiate and adjust, on the fly, at least to, some degree. But yeah, I don't know. I think she prepped for a number of questions, but in the end decided with the ring to just go with, you know what, I don't want Melanie to be mad at me by putting her back in the spotlight, because look, she mentions that the rings were for Zulema and Alex, and here I am talking about how ridiculous that allegation, or I don't know, story was. There's nothing to support it, but I think, like she doesn't want to lose Melanie's alignment. But what do you think would have happened to Chad if he and Lori had not gotten caught, and if they broke it off? I don't think she would have killed him, because I think at that point, with already having had 2 ex-husbands, well, 1 ex-husband, 1 estranged husband, die under suspicious circumstances, I don't think that she would have killed Chad. But I also don't think that Chad would have ever put a life insurance policy in her name. Like I think they both knew what the other was capable of, and I think eventually, he would have been way too, I don't know, I don't want to say unsophisticated, because she wasn't sophisticated, and I don't want to use like derogatory terms like dork, but I can't think of like a better term for it at the moment. Like the kind of dad who's wearing New Balance with, khakis and dark socks and, stuff. Like, I don't think that would have worked for her too long. But at the same time, she did give him quite the, I don't know, the makeover by the time they were on their honeymoon. So, yeah, but I think eventually their marriage would have spun out. And especially once they ran out of money, right? Neither of them had marketable skills that would have worked in a capacity that would have generated the kind of money she was used to from Joe and Charles. Let's see. Did Tylee have chronic medical conditions like Lori said? Was Tylee on prescribed meds? Lori mentioned chronic pancreatitis. So yeah, when she was younger, yeah, she had, well, supposedly it was pancreatitis. I do wonder if she had Munchausen's by proxy. Joe suspected that that Lori was giving her unsanctioned pills. He talked about how when he would pick her up on Fridays, she would just sleep. And so he felt like their visitation really didn't even start until Saturday, which, that tracks with Lori. I do wonder, because Tylee had such a strong personality, if Lori was actually trying to kill her early on while playing the role of like the typical Munchausen's mom, like I was by her side and, looking like a hero and, things like that. But we'll never know. But, I talked about how like their diet was really bad. And Colby talked about that in Alive too, that, he had struggled with being overweight as a kid. And, that his diet was a lot of junk and stuff. But so, I mean, that doesn't help with, with medical issues, but certainly there are a lot of really good parents out there who have kids who like they're doing, like they're eating healthfully, their kids are active, but like some kids just have medical issues. So I really try to be careful when I'm answering these questions, not to, kind of succumb to friendly fire where like I'm basically making other people who are really good parents question, wait, does she think, any kid who has chronic health problems, has terrible parents? I don't. I absolutely don't. But yeah, but at this point, Lori deserves no benefit of the doubt, and so I think also her desperate need for attention is definitely been a common denominator over the years. And so the Munchausens would have afforded her a lot of that. And not just from the medical community, but also from her family, because like Summer talks about her in glowing terms about how, she was there for Tylee, with all of her hospital stays and stuff like that. I'm like, maybe. Uh, okay, Lynn asked, I think Lori has resentment and anger towards Tylee. Do you have an opinion on this? If so, why? Yes, I definitely do. So I've talked about this quite a bit. Early on, I think a lot of people assumed that because they were LDS, that Lori was probably like this really controlling mom and like abusive in more of like a Ruby Frankie kind of way. And, again, I've always said like, like I had so little experience with this family. I can only kind of attest to like small cross sections at different points in their, growing up. But what I witnessed in the different times I was there was Lori was very much like, she wanted to be like the cool mom, and so she was very accommodating, and Tylee and Colby, they really ran the show. Charles kind of hung back because they weren't, weren't his kids, so he didn't get too involved, but they ran the show, and and Lori was more accommodating, and Tylee could be particularly abrasive at times, like I would say disrespectful toward her mom, with just how in the first couple days I was a little mystified by it and trying to figure it out. Is it because she's just grown up with all this privilege? And then it wasn't even 2 full days before Lori started showing her true colors in some of the crazy bizarre things that she said, and insensitive things in front of Tylee. And then it was like I kind of had to replay all of the video of of the dynamics that I saw between them, and I was like, oh no, this girl has a lot of reason to be angry, especially if she's had to deal with this level of narcissism, like really kind of malignant narcissism, and completely trash talking her dad, and even embarrassing Tylee. Like Lori wanted the two of us to go and work out with Colby, and another time we went to the gym, and Lori would, I don't know, it was too far. Like she'd be like, Tylee, we're going to the gym. Are you sure you don't want to go with us? And Tylee was clearly annoyed. She did not want to go to the gym with us. And even as someone on the outside looking in, I'm like, yeah, I don't think continuing to ask her is going to change her mind. Like Tylee was very decisive. Nope, don't want anything to do with that, like not even a little bit. But Lori would still just push it. And so I was like, I don't know if she just isn't aware. Like, you're embarrassing her. Like, you're making her feel bad. Like, well, in case you have any question as to why she struggles with her weight, see what I deal with? Like, she doesn't want to go to the gym. And, that at least that's how it came across to me. And so anyway, so I saw, like, there were times like Tylee would kind of quip at her, and Lori was more like kind of laugh it off and things like that. But then I suspect that when she met Chad, and because Chad was so desperate to get in her pants, he was willing to, I don't know, indulge like her every petty grievance she had toward anyone. And the fact that he had those light and dark ratings, he had those, this was a new piece of information that I learned this past week. That first conference that they were at together in St. George, that was a 3-day conference. Like, that conference went from the 26th to the 28th. Well, why is that relevant? Like, he basically went home and like codified all of her petty grievances. So if someone, like, I'm sure he heard about her whole family, and he was able to quantify these grievances. And so I think once they started talking about these death percentages, and Tylee was the one where, like, I will make the case, he didn't want to kill JJ. And I know some people will disagree. I will make the case with the interactions, and people are free to come to their own conclusions. I think she wore him down. But with Tylee, I'm like, right from the starting gate. Oh, her death percentage is 0.13%. Like, what a dork, like that's just so stupid. Like he's just trying to justify or, lend credibility to this number he just pulled out of, thin air. But he was all in on that. Like, yes, no, she can go. But yeah, so like there was no one. You just see, even like with Lori's friends, like no one was willing to advocate for Tylee. It seemed like all of her friends kind of backed her up on that. But I think that once Lori had this crowd who all supported her, it looked like no one was like, Lori, do you hear yourself? You're saying your daughter is a dark spirit. But she had all of these people either giving her full consent, like Melanie Gibb, it appears, clearly Chad, Zulema, or tacit consent by just not challenging it. And that's more like the Serena, Christina, some of her Hawaii friends and stuff. Like no one stood in the way of that. But I think that it was like once she felt like she had a little bit of power, I think all of those years of feeling upbraided by Tylee, questioned, embarrassed by her, even in like their the body cam footage of them in Gilbert Police, I think there were 3 different times where Tylee called her out. And one of them, she was talking about how like she didn't know how Charles got into the car, and she wasn't, like he took her keys or something like that, and she couldn't get into the car. And Tylee pointed out that she keeps her keys on the outside of her purse, which she did. She would hook them on the the strap. But I'm sure that Lori did not appreciate that. And she did the same thing to Melanie Gibb. Melanie Gibb was like, oh yeah, Charles texted this, that. And Tylee holds up her phone. She was like, do you have the text messages? Like she's like telling Melanie Gibb, I don't even know if she was trying to do that on purpose. And I think she was just like, well, we're here in front of police and this just happened today. So, why don't you just show them the text messages? And Melanie was like, oh yeah, no, I don't have them on my phone. I'm like, what the hell? But anyway, so I think once Lori had the support of other people saying, oh yeah, she's dark, she's terrible, yeah, she's in the way, then I think all of that resentment and there was this tectonic shift where Lori was like, I'm in control now, and I think that's part of the reason, if it's true what Melanie Gibbs said, and this I actually believe her about, I think that would be the reason why Lori would have actually called Tylee a zombie, because I think Lori kind of got off on causing that psychological torment, especially if Tylee knew that her dad was also killed, and then I'm sure she knew that like there was this whole big family meeting about how Charles has to go and kill or be killed kind of thing, yeah, and so I think that I think Lori just gave in to that resentment, and by the end there was nothing Tylee could do to win her mom over. I mean, you'll see on Friday, and we've seen this, like other people have talked about this, and it came up in at least one of the trials, where Lori asked Chad for an update on Tylee's rating, or she wanted to know if she had been switched because she was being sweet and had cleaned her room. And Chad was like, oh yeah, she's been switched. In other words, she's like, there is no remnant of Tylee there anymore. She is completely overtaken by Hillary. He's not very creative. So, I mean, in Tylee's case, it was damned if you do, damned if you don't. Didn't Melanie Gibb help Lori steal Charles' truck from the airport and help get rid of all his clothes? So there were 3 different claims about who helped Lori steal Charles' truck from the airport. April Raymond pinned Melanie Gibb. I think it was Melanie Gibb pinned Alex, but Colby and Summer both said it was Zach Cox. But once the truck was home, then Melanie Gibb went with Lori they hid it in the parking lot. I think it was the hotel that Lori was staying at. So, and she did participate in helping to clear out Charles and JJ's stuff and hide it, and some of the stuff they gave away, like to Salvation Army or something. So yeah, I think in that particular case, because there were 2 people saying it was Zach, I think it was probably most likely Zach. But it is interesting that when Lori said that Zach had become a zombie, or his name is the only one that fit in the redaction, she mentioned that that she thought it happened in February, and she actually said something about like, oh, he was so sweet and so dear, and then he turned in February. So what I suspect happened is, if it was Zach, if it was or not, I suspect what happened was, we know that Zach ghosted Charles because Charles said in the body cam footage that he hadn't heard from Zach for 10 days. And then he was trying to get a hold of Zach to let him into the house because Zach lived with them and had a key. But Zach wasn't responding. But I suspect what happened was, that was like the very end of January. And I suspect when Lori really went off the deep end, Zach distanced himself from Lori, and we know that he moved in with the Boudreaux. We don't know exactly when that was. It might come up in this trial, but I suspect at that point he had distanced himself from Lori, and then you really don't see his involvement in the rest of the case, except for there was a pretty big Adam's wife at the time, can't think of her name, she had a timeline for Adam and Zach, and then Adam and Zach had a timeline, and those timelines were very different. So so we may get more insight into that, but once we get past like the first couple days after Charles was killed, Zach really doesn't come up. And so I think Zach might be someone where the prosecution, I hope, I really hope they just say, it's not worth putting this guy through, having Lori question him. And I've said before, he's the one I have the most confidence in, who was like involved in all of this, like his ability to pull away and distance himself and be able to build a very different life for himself and his family if he chooses to have a family someday. But so I hope everyone just leaves him alone. Did Lori ever share that she learned parenting tips from the Love and Logic website? She mentioned Love and Logic on Dateline. I've never heard of that website, so yeah, I don't know. Someone did send me a clip of where, she had said, like, she was trying to say, like, she was a good mom, like she never hit her kids and this and that. And I've talked about this before, but it's like, well, yeah, but I don't know if that's true, but she handed that, like, the discipline over to new husbands who didn't even have a relationship with the kid, and so I definitely saw that with Joe and Colby. So yeah, I thought that was very disingenuous. But who do you think will be Lori's star witness? Nobody. I don't think there's going to be a single witness who, I mean, unless they have someone lined up who can testify to, like, the lack of investigation. I mean, that would be a slam dunk because there was definitely a serious lack of investigation. Their trajectory analysis seemed inconsequential at best, especially for them to note in the police report that Alex's absolutely outrageous claims aligned with the evidence. I mean, just from what we could see in the pictures, and this might be arrogance on my part, but like, nope, none of the evidence aligned with almost anything he said, starting with the fact that there was no blood anywhere to be found in the room. And then they didn't luminol, they didn't run gunshot residue. So she may bring in, like, expert witnesses who could really do a number on Chandler police, especially. But outside of that, like, I think even if she calls Melanie Pulowski, which she may, no one's going to want to testify for her. Like, they've already have been running the gauntlet for years, and everyone who has something to hide, they have to be terrified. Like, what is going to come out next? I mean, even in now, just like, I don't want to harp on, like, this search tool that I have, but even with just being able to run keyword searches across trials, like, there are details I never caught before. Not saying that's remarkable. I didn't even follow the trials, but even in the testimonies I did follow, I still caught things because it was like, oh, wait a minute, that happened October 12th. Let me look at the timeline. Oh, wow. Oh, okay. That was, this particular day, or, like, this is just one example. We all know that at some point, Colby had told Lori they couldn't take care of Bailey anymore. But like, I was adding something else to the timeline, and I don't mean to pick on Colby, but when I was looking at the timeline, I was like, oh, well, so he went with her to Houston. They cleared out Charles' home, put a bunch of stuff in his truck, and had Alex drive it back to Phoenix. We've known that for a long time. But so he was willing to do that, and then he took Bailey. And I've kind of harped on this only because, like, for anyone who had actually seen JJ with Bailey would know, like, how could you do that? Like, his dad disappeared from his life and his dog on the same day, and then there was so much chaos, and then someone at his school said something about his daddy in heaven, and JJ got really upset and said, my daddy isn't in heaven, he's on a business trip. And so I mean, and he had already been back and forth between Phoenix and Houston and in Louisiana, and I mean, his last year, both his and Tylee's last year of life had to have been hellish for different reasons. But so I was really surprised that Colby, knowing JJ, obviously as close as he was, that he'd be willing to keep Bailey, because there was really no point in that. But then Lori found out she wasn't the beneficiary, and we don't know when, at this point, we don't know when she told Colby, but he told her the next day, come get Bailey. We can't take care of him. So, so some of these things, it's like, it's just even when you see it in context, but yeah, so, I think there could be small details that come out that may seem inconsequential, but when compared to these other trials, or put in the context of a timeline, you're like, wow, that is actually pretty consequential. Regarding Munchausen's, did any hospital still have records that the police could see could look at to see if Lori contributed to Tylee's medical episodes? This is part of why I love the Q&A. So one of the things that really enraged me, whether that's fair or not, is well, first let me answer the question. We don't know. They really didn't pull a lot of records. Having said that, when they, someone from Chandler Police, I think it was Detective Yinklin, sent another, like probably a junior detective maybe, to JJ's pediatrician's office to get his medical records. And Tylee was also missing at that time. Like, we already knew, like they had already done the welfare check, and then they found out the next day that Tylee was also unaccounted for. And I've talked about my issue that I've had with law enforcement and these, different people still treating Tylee as one of the perpetrators, instead of a victim. And I think some of these family members had a really significant role in that. Having said that, they went to the pediatrician's office and asked for JJ's records. And I believe it was the office manager at the pediatrician's office said, well, we have Tylee's records too. Would you like Tylee's records? Well, they hadn't included Tylee's records in the search warrant. So Detective Yinklin had to go back to a judge and ask for Tylee's medical records too. But I think it was just like one example. It's not, it doesn't really answer your question, but I'm just saying, like, if they weren't even inclined to get Tylee's medical records, even from like leading up to, the, I don't know, after finding out she was missing, but they asked for JJ's. I doubt they did any investigation. And, to be fair, I don't know that they would have gotten a search warrant, because they have to justify these, the pulling of these in different records. So they didn't have probable cause to believe that Lori had been poisoning Tylee or, anything like that. So, but I'm just saying, like, they weren't even inclined to get her medical records. And Detective Yunklin, in trying to get her email records from Hotmail, I think it was, she actually said that Tylee was a suspect in a crime. And I've brought this up before. Obviously, she didn't actually believe that she was a suspect in a crime because she set the beginning date for September, I think it was like September 1st or, September 8th. It was like basically, around the time that there was the last proof of life. And so if she had actually thought that Tylee was a suspect in Charles' murder, she would have predated that 2 months before Charles' murder. So, from what I can tell, from, what I know just from having common sense. But I think at that point, like, it was in the boilerplate. I'm sure she was thinking, like, you know what? I just want to get these search records. And some of these bigger companies, they do push back. They're not always inclined to heed search warrants and may challenge them and stuff. So she might have just been thinking, like, I'm just going to list her as a suspect and, kind of attach more brawn to this search warrant. But yeah, so I'm sure she never anticipated that one day Tylee's aunt would be reading the boilerplate of the search warrant. But regardless, like, don't be sketch, don't be unethical, But if truly Tylee wasn't a suspect, if she was a suspect, so be it. But I don't think she was a suspect. Do you think Charles was part of the torment of Joe and knew he was unalived? Yes. Charles was so scared about Lori at the end of his life. Think he knew about her and Joe? Yes, absolutely. And I have a video on my channel. And this is another example of where, like, I had watched this body cam video, I would say probably maybe 3 to 5 times. And I was looking for something else. And I had backed up the video, because, like, when I grab a snippet, I want to make sure I go back far enough so that, like, some of the stuff that shows up on the screen, like, disappears. And, some of the stuff that indicates, okay, you're recording a video now. And when I did that, I discovered something I had never noticed before. But he had I've talked about it before, and the video is on my channel. But when he was talking to Gilbert police and trying to convince them that Lori was dangerous, he said that Lori said, "I'm going to kill you too." And then it looks like he catches himself. Like, he doesn't go down that rabbit hole at all. The detectives he was talking to, they didn't pick it up. To be fair, neither did any of us. When I made that video, no one said, "Oh yeah, I wondered about that too." Usually there's at least someone who's like, "Oh, I wondered about that too," But in this case, it was one word changed everything, because ostensibly he was the first person she had threatened to kill. So for him to say that Lori said, "I'm going to kill you too," he, and to not follow it up with, so then I was like, "Two? Who else have you killed?" Because that would have really helped his case. Like, like, you really need to check out this woman because there was someone else. Like, I don't know who she's talking about, but I think that she may have killed someone else. He didn't do that. He changed the subject. And so, yeah, I do think that he, at minimum, knew that Joe was killed. One, because Lori has, like I said, she has no internal editor. I think everyone living in that home, which would include Colby, Kelsey, and Zach, I think everyone, and Tylee, I think they all knew how Joe was killed. And I have my own suspicions just having gone through I think it was like 134 photos from the welfare check that a reporter had passed on to me. But so I do think that they tell a story. So yeah, I do think that he knew, and I think it was like 11 days before he was killed, he and Lori were fighting back and forth. He had just found the email that she had sent to Chad using an alias that was similar to Charles' email. And so he was absolutely outraged. Like, he knew that she was cheating on him with this guy, Chad Daybell, and passed on the videos and the evidence to both Kay and Adam. There's no record that any of this evidence was passed on to law enforcement, and none of it was entered as evidence in either of the trials in Idaho. But he already knew that she was cheating. But I think it was just the fact that it was like, wait, you used my name, like, I'm going. And I think, some of it was just like, not ego, but just like, ew, this guy, you think I'm going to use your dork ass boyfriend to write a book for me, and yeah, so I think, on every level he was highly offended. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh, but in the midst of them fighting about that, she replied to one of his text messages with, "Okay, Joe Ryan." And I absolutely think that was a shot across the bow. Like, I believe that, or at least strongly suspect, no, I believe he knew exactly what that meant. He knew that his life was in imminent danger. What I'll never understand is why he went into the house. It just seemed like there was no one on his team who just gave him even like basic advice. Like, when a relationship turns that dangerous, like, you meet in a public place, you don't go into some place where there are no witnesses and stuff. So I think that part was unfortunate, but I don't think he went in there because he didn't think she was capable of murdering him. I think he knew that. Do you think if David Warwick had not told Melanie Gibb to be honest with police, she would have? I don't know that I believe that story. First of all, that that was passed on. I think that was like in that what was that forum? It wasn't Preparing a People, it was AVAL. So, like, he had talked sense into her, something like that. So in my opinion, that read very much like a dude telling a story. So he may have played a role in it, but I think also, I think Melanie, I think she absolutely would have come forward. For the same reason that, I don't want to put these on the same level. I'm just drawing an analogy. For the same reason that Colby came forward the day after the case went public and said, my mom gave me her car, because he had told law enforcement that they asked him to, let them know if she ever reached out to him. And he already knew at that point that she was planning on giving him that car, and he didn't disclose that, and then he didn't tell them that she had given him the car, and that this had been brokered. And I think he sat and watched the first day of the case being public, and I mean, the police report noted that I think he called at like 9:03 a.m. the next day. And I don't say this to like to be mean. I think he genuinely watched the coverage and was like, oh my gosh, I have to I have to come clean about this. So I think similarly, I think Melanie, because she had been evading law enforcement. She wasn't answering their calls. That's why, like, from the moment that Rexburg police put out their affidavit of probable cause, I focused in on Melanie because there was one line where it was like, after not hearing back from her that evening, I think it was, they sent, I think it was Detective Pillar to her home. And I was like, wait a minute, what? You have law enforcement trying to get a hold of you about a special needs child who is missing, who Lori said was with you, and you're just not answering their calls, and they have to come to your home. And so, that she was on my radar from that day, just because that's not normal. That's not what a person with no horse in the race, no culpability does, and, again, just drawing on my own experience from finding out, like, one of my foster sisters had been abducted and was missing. It's like, I can go back to that day. I remember where I was standing, how I was feeling, just the shock and the horror of it. And, so it's not normal to be like, oh, please keep trying to call me, and I'm just not answering, and I'm going to get in my car and go to my boyfriend's in Utah. So I'm sure at some point, I'm kind of surprised it took her as long as it did, but I think even, David would have been like, this could come back on both of us. We were there. I think they both know way more than we will ever know because we don't have their phone records or any of their data. I mean, they got Brandon Boudreaux's phone data. They got Kay's phone data, and they didn't get Melanie or David's. But yeah, so I think they were both probably freaking out and trying to get their story straight. So I personally will never believe that, like, David was just this bastion of, Christian morals who was like, honey, you need to do the right thing. And, so, he talked sense into her. I think they were talking nonsense into each other. And that's why it took as long as it took, So, yeah. Oh, hey, Carissa, no question. Just want you to know I love your shirt. So I was out somewhere and I saw a woman with this shirt and I loved it so much. I just went out to her. I was like, excuse me, where did you get your shirt? Excuse me, but thank you. I love it too. Okay, this is going to be the last question and then I need to go to bed. If there are more questions, I'll address them in the next live Q&A. Plus, Friday we'll have a different live, but that Q&A will probably be more, tethered to that topic. Julie asked, I recently heard, can't remember the source, that Alex and Zulema never consummated the marriage. Do you have evidence of this? No? No, I wouldn't have evidence of that. But if, now I will say, if there's one person who was truly delusional and drank the Kool-Aid more than anyone else, I do think it was Alex. But I think it's because he was very slow. I mean, just even reading some of his interactions. No, he was still sentient. He wasn't, he was still he was high functioning enough to be able to completely snow two sets of detectives, first with Chandler police and then again in Utah. and he was able to come across like cool as a cucumber, and just even the way he answered questions, he just acted like I have nothing to hide, I have nothing to worry about. So so it's not like if he was on the spectrum, he was so far on the spectrum, like, or so incapacitated that he would be like kind of like my mom, who ironically, from everything I've heard, was actually highly intelligent, but she also had very, very serious mental health issues. But yeah, so I think if if they were able to convince him that he needed to marry Zulema to be able to go to the celestial city or whatever it is. I don't mean that disrespectfully toward the LDS faith. I just really haven't like devoted myself to learning about their religion or their beliefs. So in that regard, like, I really can't, like, there are some beliefs that I'm like, oh yeah, that's this weird group versus that's LDS. But I think the LDS thinks that like they believe that you have to be married to do something. I don't know. But if they were able to convince him that, in order to get whatever heavenly reward he was going to get, that he had to marry, I think he would have thought that they actually have to consummate the marriage. But I don't think anyone will be able to prove that one way or the other. But if they did, it certainly wasn't like out of like, some kind of hot romance. I don't think they even liked each other. I mean, even just like the person describing the ceremony, how it was just, they were in and out. And I don't think that they, like I said, I don't think they had rings. I don't think, she had flowers. I don't think they even got dressed up, to be honest, but yeah, I don't know. But one thing I will say, I absolutely do not believe Zulema's TARP story. I've talked about this before, but her attorney in that meeting with, it was then Detective Hermosillo and maybe Kaikamanu, excuse me, and her attorney had just been talking about doing renovations on their home. Excuse me. And he had talked about how for however many days, or maybe it was overnight, the back of their home was just left open, and they just like put a tarp over it, like, I guess, to keep animals out and stuff. And yeah, I think Zulema, whether consciously or subconsciously, grabbed onto that. And so I think she was desperate to make it look like she could have been next, like she was talking about how, he like wanted her to get on this tarp. And, again, like, her story kind of was indicative of her own lack of intelligence, lack of ingenuity, because I think most people with a modicum of, like, common sense would be like, yeah, you know what, that doesn't track, because like, you wouldn't even have to be like a Dexter fan to be like, yeah, you know what, if someone wants to give you a massage, especially in a group where they saw malachite as a healing balm, and someone's going to give you a massage and be like, yeah, just climb on top of this tarp here. Like, anyone would be like, get out of here, So, but I think she was desperate to make herself look like a victim. And Melanie Gibb did the same thing. In fact, she threw both Zulema and Alex under the bus in trying to make herself look like a victim, because she said something to the effect of, I'm living around the corner from murderers. Well, the only people around the corner at that point were Alex and Zulema. I think they all lived in Gilbert, and they lived close by. So I'm like, whoa, way to throw Zulema under the bus and back it up. But I think, like, and at one point, one of the detectives, I think it was someone from, I don't know, it was an Arizona detective. And who knows, he may have been trying to play good cop. I don't know. There was no bad cop, if that was the case. But he was talking about how, like, he was trying to figure out who was in this group. And he was like, like, I know you were kind of on the outside. He said something to that effect. Like, almost like, there was this nucleus of people who shared all these weird beliefs. And then there's Melanie, the free electron, just kind of, keeping a distance from it all. I'm like, she literally wanted to be there the night that they were talking and planning, talking about murdering Charles and planning the murder. Like, she wanted in on all of it. I'm not saying she actively played a role in the actual murder, but she wanted to ride shotgun through the whole thing until Lori hurt her feelings by pulling her into it and saying she had JJ. So and that's when she even said, like, if you love me, why would you do that? But I think they both just wanted to make themselves look like victims so that law enforcement would go easier on them. And the only one I really saw hold her feet to the flames was then Detective Hermosillo. But anyway, so, okay. On that note, have a good night, and I may see some of you on Friday. As I find some of these things, I will throw them out on the channel, either through the community tab, if it really kind of requires a more of an explanation, or through the videos. But I started down this path to I was trying to, like, prepare as much as possible for the trial, just so I kind of had, like, updated my timeline and things like that, so that when that trial comes along, especially since now I'm not in school, I'm still very busy, but I do want to see Lori represent herself, and so I do want to follow this trial a little closer if at all possible. But so I'll just be tossing that stuff out on the channel, and I'll see you Friday. Good night.